Morning students, today's topic is nutrition competition number 14.23 and subtopic is glycemic index of food and the examples of food with high and low glycemic index. At the end of this lecture you should able to measure a glycemic index of the food. The term glycemic index was introduced by David J. Jenskin and co-worker. It represents relative rise in blood glucose level in 2 hours after consumption of specific food. It is different for different food. Coming to the definition, the glycemic index is a number from 0 to 100 assigned or given to the food which represents the relative rise in blood glucose level in 2 hours of consuming particular food item with respect to same quantity of glucose. That means we have to give same quantity of glucose and we have to measure the blood glucose level of a person, and the next setting we have to give the same amount of food to that person and we have to measure the blood glucose level of that person. The blood glucose level of a food glucose is considered as 100 and which is highest, whereas other food have less rise in blood glucose level as compared to glucose, because glucose is a monosaccharide. It is directly absorbed, no digestion is required, so it is directly absorbed and it will give rise to highest peak of rise in blood sugar level among the foods. So for this purpose glycemic index of glucose is considered as 100 and it is called as reference meal. So glucose is called as reference meal. Now this demonstrates the procedure where you have given glucose to the person, 50 gram of glucose to the person, and you have measured blood glucose level after half hour, 1 hour, 1.5 hour, 2 hour and 2.5 hour. Then we have given a test meal. The test meal may be any. You can take 50 grams of rice, 50 grams of bread, 50 grams of pasta, anything that we want to measure the glycemic index. That is given, and again the same procedure is repeated, and his blood glucose level after half hour, 1 hour, 1.5 hour, 2 hour and 2.5 hour is measured. After measuring the blood glucose level, you have to plot the graph. So before plotting the graph, this is the graph, and glycemic index is calculated by the formula increment area under the glucose tolerance curve after 50 gram of test meal divided by incremental area under the curve after 50 gram of reference meal, that into 100. So after plotting the graph of glucose as well as test meal, then you have to take the area under curve of glucose and area under curve of reference meal. You have to take the ratio and multiply it by 100. This gives you the value of glycemic index of a particular food, and already I have told you that the glycemic index of glucose, which is a reference meal, is highest. It is considered as highest, and other foods have glycemic index less than 100. Now here I have given the red line graph shows the graph of glucose which is highest, whereas the two graph below that shows two different test meals are given. So if the graph of reference meal, that is glucose, and the graph of test meals are near to each other, then you can say that glycemic index is more of that food. If the graph of that reference meal, test meal is away from the graph of reference meal, then that food have less glycemic index. One more thing about this glycemic index is that glycemic index is directly proportional to insulin secretion. That means if the glycemic index of food is more, then insulin secretion is more, and when more insulin is secreted, then it will convert the food atoms into fat. That means formation of fat is also more. Now the food is classified into three types: food with low glycemic index, mid glycemic index, and high glycemic index. Low glycemic index food means when the score, that means the formula in the back slide that we have studied, like after calculation, if you get the score of a test meal 55 or below 55, then you call that food as a food of low glycemic index. If the score of the food by the previous formula ranges from 56 to 69, then it is called as food of mid-range glycemic index food. And if the score of the food or score of the test meal is more than 70 or more than 70, then you call that food as a food of high glycemic index. Now glycemic index does not absolutely depends on type of food. There are some factors on which this glycemic index depends. First, quantity and type of carbohydrate you are taken. Glycemic index is only confined to the rise in the blood glucose level, right? So if we take more quantity of carbohydrate, then your glycemic index may be high. And type of carbohydrates are also important. Suppose you have taken X amount of sucrose and X amount of starch. The glycemic index of sucrose is more because it is a disaccharide, it is easily digested and absorbed. Whereas starch is a complex carbohydrate, so it requires more time for digestion. Therefore, it is slowly absorbed as compared to sucrose. So sucrose have high glycemic index as compared to carbohydrate. Therefore, type and quantity of food is carbohydrate is also important for glycemic index. Then next factor is presence of fat, protein, organic acids and dietary fibers in the food. When you consume a food, we generally consume a mixture of food which contain this fat, protein, organic acid, dietary fibers, etc. If this content of these are more, then they interfere with the digestion and absorption of carbohydrates. Hence, the glycemic index of food is decreased. Next factor is cooked and uncooked food. If we consume a cooked food, it is easily digested and therefore it is easily absorbed, so it will have high glycemic index as compared to uncooked food because it is not easily digested and absorbed. Then presence of resistant starch in the diet. As the name suggests, resistant, it is resistant to digestion. If we consume a resistant starch, then it is not digested easily and hence our glycemic index decreases. Presence of dietary fibers, again they interfere with the digestion and absorption of carbohydrates and lowers the glycemic index. Now what is the importance of glycemic index? I have already told you actual insulin secretion depends on glycemic index. If a food with high glycemic index is taken, more insulin is synthesized. More insulin means more synthesis of fat, development of insulin resistance, which may lead to development of diabetes mellitus and obesity. Food with low glycemic index is advised for the patient of diabetes mellitus and obesity. So these are some examples of foods with low and high glycemic index. Legumes have low glycemic index, whereas cereals have moderate glycemic index. Some cereals like white bread, cornflakes and white rice have high glycemic index. Cereals like brown rice, whole wheat, roti, sweet corn have moderate. Fruits like apple, orange, guava, cherries, pear, plum, strawberries have low glycemic index. Banana, ripe banana and kiwis have moderate glycemic index. But fruits like watermelon, mangoes, pineapple, overripe banana and raisins have high glycemic index. If you see here, ripe banana have moderate glycemic index, whereas overripe means blackish colored banana have high glycemic index. So glycemic index is not absolutely depend on a food, but it also depends on condition of food, cooked cooking pattern, and presence of other substances like dietary fibers, fat, proteins, etc. like this. Then milk, yogurt and almonds have low glycemic index, whereas boiled potato and oats have moderate. Sugary drinks and instant mashed potatoes have high glycemic index food. So such foods should be avoided. So this is about the glycemic index. Thank you very much.